Do you remember this place? I was there, wearing a suit. He was there, being all judgy and stuff. And they were there, tearing the case apart. And together, we were mad about Rengar. At this point we all know that the Ruination had quite a few problems, from being disconnected from the lore, to being disconnected from our expectations, to the amount of disconnects caused by the grinding. But above all of those issues, if there was one thing people got attached to, it is the fact that the champions in this so-called lore event didn't fit at all. Vayne randomly started using magical weapons, Graves was there because he literally had nothing else to do, Rengar was turned from an apex predator into a comedic bonehead, and where the heck was Maokai? Not to mention that Riot really did not remember Yorick Mori. Long story short, Riot didn't do the best job at including champions who would be relevant to the lore of the event. And instead they put in champions that would sell skins. The scary thing is, Riot's been teasing a Void event for a while now, which likely means a new lineup of champions who would fight the Void. But this time I decided not to idly stand by as the train wreck approaches. And instead I decided to do what every intern should. I'll do Riot's job for them. So in this video we will talk about every single champion whose story has been leading up to fighting the Void for years now. So without further ado, let's avoid another forgetting of Yorick Mori, as we dive into the champions who have to be included in the Void event. When it comes to the Void itself, by which I mean the horrifying dimension outside our reality that is occupied by the Watchers, there is one champion who is currently holding the line against them, and who's making sure these world-consuming creatures don't erupt onto Runeterra: Lissandra. In the present days, Lissandra is kidnapping the Iceborn so she can use their icy powers to strengthen the ice that is holding back the Watchers. But also, she is feeding the dreams of these frozen thralls to the Watchers, which makes them sleepy and relatively at peace. Should a Watcher actually wake up, the Draklorn, who are Lissandra's followers, constructed these massive spikes. And should a Watcher try to get up, these spikes would pin them down. These are the last defense Runeterra has. Now, while Lissandra's lore is heavily related to the Void, seeing how the event is teased to be happening in Shurima, I don't believe Lissandra would be part of it. After all, the event seems to be related to Rek'Sai and the new mysterious Empress who's going to be the next champion. With that said, just know that in Sejuani's recent story, there was a shaman who told her that now is the time to unite the Freljord, because apparently some big threat is approaching. Which could mean that the Void will attack in the Freljord as well, so it might be happening on multiple fronts, just like it happened during Ruination. However, remember, Riot didn't like how the Ruination happened in multiple regions at once. It made the story feel scattered, so I'm not sure if Riot will try to do the same thing again. Hopefully they will only focus on Shurima. Anyway, besides Lissandra, there are other champions who are related to the Void, and most of which are from Shurima. So let's start with the most important one, Zilean. Zilean was a mage who traveled all around Runeterra as he studied magic, and eventually he became part of the mage council of his home kingdom, Icathia. He was there when Aksamuk, the last mage king of Icathia, started a war with the Shuriman Empire. And he was there when the council decided to use the new mysterious voidy power they randomly found against the ascended god warriors. Of course, we all know what happened next. In an attempt to defend themselves from Azir's army, the Icathians unleashed the Void and in the process, doomed themselves. But as the Void started consuming the kingdom, Zilean urged as many people as possible into his tower, and using his magic he removed the entire structure from time. In reality, he himself didn't fully understand how he did that. But while everyone else was frozen in time, he was free to move around. So while he saved these people, he didn't know how to reverse the magic. And that's what his lore is about. He technically survived against the Void, so he's currently searching through timelines and he's looking for one where he successfully reversed time. But in doing so, he also saw many timelines where the Void devoured everything. So now he realizes that time may be the only weapon to stop the Void. So with all of this mentioned, I think it's safe to say that Zilean has to be part of the war against the Void. Directly connected to what happened in Icathia, there is also another extremely important champion. The lover of eggs, who is also most likely a sand troll, Jax. Also known as Saijix Kaliring's Koari Ikathun. The story of Jax is very simple. In Icathia, Jax was one of the Koari, which were elite warriors tasked with protecting the kingdom. In fact, Jax was so powerful that when the Ascended God warriors attacked the kingdom, he was able to kill an Ascended in a one-to-one combat. This is also where we need to mention an interesting fact. When the Void was first discovered, the Icathians noticed that the Void was afraid of their elemental fire. So while researching the Void, all the mages carried around staffs with that fire. Now, after Icathia was defeated, Jax traveled to the crater where the Void was summoned for the first time. He was ready to die in battle like an honorable warrior. But there, among all the chaos, he found one of the lanterns still ablaze. Inspired by this fire that was holding back the Void, he picked it up and called it the Last Light of Icathia. He then forsook his old name, became simply Jax, and he traveled out into the world so he could find other powerful warriors so that together they could rebuild the Koari. So that together they could defeat the Void. So as you can see, Jax absolutely has to be part of the Voidy event. His entire story is about fighting against it. But more than that, Jax already found another powerful warrior. In one of his stories, he traveled to the Malzahar, and he found Fiora. This is a relatively small interaction between the two characters, and the story cut off right before they dueled. But because of this, they have to drag Fiora into the event too. If somehow Fiora doesn't make it, I'll be mad. Because in case you don't know, that story has been up on Universe for 6 years. For 6 years, Riot's been teasing that Jax and Fiora teamed up. So don't screw this up. But there is one more champion who has been recently teased to be fighting the Void. Bard. In his newest story, it was revealed that Bard is collecting fragments of something called the World Bell. The fragments are what we know as chimes. And the World Bell is apparently Runeterra itself. So Bard is essentially trying to repair the planet. And after it is fixed, it can rewind the music of the Void. At least that's how the story puts it. So besides all the mortal champions, Bard should be there too. Besides these heroes, there is also the obvious villain, Malzahar. Malzahar's lore is pretty simple. He was a prophet who got a vision of the Void, he traveled south to figure out what the Void was about, bim bam boom, he's corrupted. The cool thing about him is that he's really good at corrupting others. So he built his own cult of people who worship the Void. But more than that, Malzahar was the one who threw these cultists into a rift and summoned the Empress. Yes, in Malzahar's newest story, he quite literally summoned the new champion. So Malzahar has to be the main villain. And right besides him we will likely see Rek'Sai too. Because in Kaisa's story it was mentioned that Rek'Sai's brood will likely rival the Empress. Speaking of which, this may be a good time to mention Kaisa and Kassadin. I am partially joking, but the funny thing about these two is Riot could skip these and nothing would really happen. To be fair, Kaisa does make sense. She fell into a rift when she was a girl, somehow she survived there as one of the Voidborn attached to her body, and ever since that she was dedicated to fighting the Void to save humanity. Kassadin, on the other side, doesn't care as much. He traveled around the world, collected runes from mages, blessings from Ionian spirit healers, he got the breathing apparatus from Zoe, and even stole a Void-infused magical Shuriman blade so he could dive into the Void, save his daughter, and kill the so-called prophet who kept summoning the Void. So Kassadin is in for revenge. He wants Malzahar dead. He doesn't really care about saving humanity as much. But all in all, yes, both Kassadin and Kaisa have to be part of the event. But we still have one more. In Kaisa's latest story, as well as in the cinematic, you may have noticed that she met Thalia in the desert. And together they decided to travel around Shurima and investigate the recent swarms of Voidborn. So Thalia has to be part of this too. Now, these are the key characters that have to be part of the Void event. Their stories are leading up to it. But there is still more that we can mention. When it comes to Malphite, his story is relatively complex, so here's the summary. Malphite was part of a construct that was created by an Ishtali Ascended called Nezuk. This construct was supposed to fly over to Icathia and destroy the Void. But even though Nezuk was the most powerful mage of Ishtal, the Void still defeated him and destroyed his flying construct. And Malphite was a piece that chipped off of it. Currently, Malphite is underground somewhere near Piltover, where he's making sure the present Voidborn stay buried under that place. Which means that yes, the Void may erupt near Piltover as well. Once again, that may be leading to the multi-region event. But this also means that Riot may include someone like Ezreal too. But it is Malphite himself who is dedicated to stopping the Void here. And since we mentioned Nezuk, we should also mention that when he was defeated, he fled. So he may be alive. However, Ezreal did find one of his gloves in the tomb of Nezuk. So since it is a tomb, maybe he didn't make it. And speaking of the Ascended who were twisted into the Darkin after their war with the Void, technically some Darkin could make it into the event too. For example, it would be cool if someone like Aatrox returned and he started reliving his memories from the war with the Void. It was a horrifying war after all, but if Riot does this, please don't make the Darkin an ally. Aatrox is still an insane power-hungry being. And when it comes to the good guys, I think we should also mention one more, and that is Ornn. Ornn did appear in the cinematics and he is part of what is happening in the Freljord now, but honestly, Ornn is just helping everyone. It would be cool if Ornn crafted special weapons that would defeat the Void. You know, technically Ornn was the one who created the bridge that is holding back the Watchers. But Ornn is just a good guy everywhere. He doesn't necessarily have to fight the Void. And once again, since it is happening in Shurima, I have no idea if they could include him. But if Ornn appears in the event, it would make sense. See, and this is where I almost forgot to mention two more champions. Some of you are going to wonder about Ryze, especially since he did have that one interaction with a Voidborn in his cinematic. But truth be told, he is saving the world, but he's doing it by collecting the world runes. He doesn't necessarily focus on dealing with the Void itself. His job is to find the world runes and make sure humanity doesn't destroy itself. To him, the Void is kind of a secondary threat. So he may appear, but he's definitely not needed. And then I almost forgot to mention the other teeny tiny guy, Aurelion. As far as we know, Aurelion is the only being in reality that can seal the Void Rifts. That's what he's been doing in his stories, and that's essentially why the Targonians enslaved him. They enslaved him so that they could use him as a welding machine. But honestly, seeing Aurelion fighting the Void besides all the other mortals feels surreal. I don't know if they can fit him into the event, but they have to. He is the one who's dealing with the Void. So in order to do that, they have to make Aurelion a secondary character. You know, maybe he just appears at the end and he fixes all the problems. But in order to do that, you also need to bring in Zoe. She's the one who's currently holding Aurelion's reins, because Pantheon is most likely not doing that anymore. Unless that's what he's going to do according to the cinematic. But yes, Aurelion is going to snowball into more and more characters. And that might be a bit too much for Riot to handle. So I have no idea what they are going to do with him. But now, finally, since we are talking about the Voidy event, let's talk about the Voidborn. Cho'Gath and Kog'Maw unfortunately have no lore. We genuinely have no idea where they are or if they could be included. Kha'Zix is in the east of Shurima, so he technically could make it into the event. And Vel'Koz is in Tokogol, which is between Demacia, Noxus and Freljord. So if Riot decides to go multi-region, Vel'Koz is gonna be the threat in the north. Now, if we look at this lineup of heroes, something is missing. There aren't too many sexy champions who would sell skins, right? Well, there is one more person. Remember how during the Ruination, Riot insisted that there is a good reason why Qiyana wasn't part of that event? Well, I speculate that Riot was planning ahead and they knew that Qiyana would be part of the Void event instead. You see, the lore of the entire Ishtal is that after Icathia was consumed by the Void, and after Ishtal lost its most powerful mage, the Ishtali believed that the Void would soon consume the entire world. So they built a massive wall of plants around their entire region to isolate themselves from the rest of the world. And after being in isolation for so long, currently Ixtal believes that the rest of the world was consumed. They believe there is literally nothing beyond their walls, and if you go outside you would instantly suffocate. However, some of their citizens know there is an outside world, with Qiyana getting ready to reveal Ixtal to the rest of the world, and show them all how powerful their empire is. And what better way to do it than to defeat the Void itself. So with all these connections to Icathia, I believe Qiyana will be part of the event too. Now with this lineup, hopefully Riot doesn't feel like they have to put in more champions for skins. Because that's exactly what they did last time. Everyone here is relevant to the lore and quite a few of them are popular. There should be no issues here. Who am I kidding? Who wants to bet Lux and Akali are getting in?